This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. In this season on the podcast, we celebrate that it's Advent. For this Advent, we wrote a book, and the we here is my neighbors in the HEB area today. I am thankful for my book writing partners at FUMC Hurst, Pastor Yvonne and Pastor Matt, as well as Pastor Katie at St. Paul, helped us write a book as we heard Christ's invitation to join our communities and you in moving into the neighborhood. Welcome back to week 4 of Into the Neighborhood here on Pod Strangely Warmed. As we continue in this conversation, I am joined once again by Reverend Yvonne Coon from FUMC Hurst and Reverend Matt Ybanez, the neighboring pastor, therefore our resident expert. He hates that title, therefore we're using it again and again and again. Our resident expert here in the spirit of neighboring. We have come on a journey together, right? Well, a journey of the Good Samaritan, right? Where we've learned what it means to join Jesus in moving into the neighborhood, right? We've learned what it means to see our neighborhood fully, to see not only our neighborhood, but God active and at work in our neighborhood. We've learned what it means to have compassion, to have our lives transformed, and kind of, and by that what I mean, compassion, its root word, right? In the Hebrew, it moves us to the depths of our being, right? And so we've learned what it means to be moved in compassion and with compassion. We've explored what it means to come alongside, right? And today we get to do the fun thing. I mean, all of it's been fun, but expand the community. That's the final step. And in the parable, we see this as the Samaritan has taken good care of the man who's been hurt, harmed, and troubled, beaten, and left for dead, right? But then when he needs to continue on his journey, he hands him off to the innkeeper, leaving funds to help care for things, but says, I will be back. But in that moment, he doesn't hold all of it for himself. He expands the community of care, the community of compassion, and the community that is seeing, having compassion, and coming alongside each other in the midst of this. Yvonne, you want to share with us a little bit what it means when you think of expanding the community a little more fully?
Well, sure. When I was reading the story, it's like it just stops there, right? So, and Jesus does this a lot. You ask Jesus a question, you get a story, and then he doesn't finish the story. And so this particular
pesky that
story,
way.
I know it. But this particular story, all we know is that he's dropped him off with the innkeeper, and he's promised to come back and pay if there's additional charges, right? And so we get to use our imaginations. What's going on in the story? What happened? Well, so what would we do, right? That's the easiest way to do this. And so I begin to imagine, okay, well, the innkeeper's busy. So he's got to reach out to his friends and say, hey, I'm taking care of this guy. I need a nurse. I need a doctor. I need, somebody to just come sit and make sure he's okay. I need somebody to serve him. I need somebody to take care of any bandages that might be there. All of that, he needs to bring people alongside. When we started working through what it means to neighbor in our community, I don't want to steal your neighbor well, because I know that's almost copyright.
Trademark, copyright.
All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did all that.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you did. But as we thought about what it means to neighbor well, one of the things, and this was something, Matt, that you shared with us early on as we were talking about coming out of the pandemic, some of the networks we lost, right? So we have these folks in our network that are really close to us, our family, the good friends, the people that we talk to all the time. Those networks were really strong and got us through the pandemic. But it's that next layer, which is where we really find the support we need to get through all of the different spaces of life that really disappeared. And I think what I see in this story, what I understand from this story, is that it's those networks that we need to expand for people, with people, right? So when I encounter somebody, the best thing I can do is to make sure that I bring others along, that we can all benefit from that. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit more about those circles?
Yeah, the statistic that blows my mind is if you are socially isolated, they talk about loneliness being sort of a pandemic in and of itself in our country. If you're socially isolated, you're more likely to die early than if you have cancer, heart disease, or substance abuse issues combined.
Really?
And so you talk about like loneliness and social isolation as a major problem in our communities. It is so prevalent, and COVID really did tear all those circles apart, so that there are so many people in our communities that when life hits the fan, there aren't people showing up in droves to be there and be present, or even to bring the casserole or whatever.
Right.
And social isolation begins to it's got these tendrils that reach out into everything. You talk about issues of infant and maternal health. The mothers who are most affected by that are single mothers without family support systems.
Yeah.
So COVID kind of tore all those circles down. And so how is it as a church we're helping to help bridge and make those connections so that there are people who when life hits the fan, somebody's showing up, who's willing to walk and be part of that journey.
And one of the things we recognized coming out of COVID was we forgot how to do relationships, right? So we had the ones that we depended on during the pandemic, but we forgot how to go out and meet somebody or how to reconnect to somebody who might not have been in that inner circle with us. And that's a big part of what Jesus was about.
Right.
He was inviting us to not only get out into our neighborhood and see and be compassionate, but to all of us come alongside, to bring the whole crew with us alongside, because it's in that bigger community that we really experience the abundant life God intends for all of us.
When we draw the circle wide, right? How many times have you had good church people, right? We are the podcast of the...
Always.
Okay, let me finish the question. But yes, always. Okay. We are the podcast of the annual conference, right? And so while we hope and pray this meets folks outside of the bounds of our annual conference, we know that our primary audience is good and faithful Methodists, good and faithful church people, right? Some might even say Methodist nerds are our primary people. How many times have you had good, faithful folks come to a time of trauma, come to a time of loss, come to a time of heartache or struggle and go, I can't understand how somebody would do this without the church, without somebody to come on, without their Sunday school class, without their community, without that community of folks to come and we joke about Methodist casseroles, but make the casseroles to feed people, to come alongside in a meaningful way. Katie talks about in the book a moment where she experienced a specific set of symptoms after the birth of her first child, right? And one of the people in her network, right, had gone through that same journey and came alongside her in the midst of that. And so I think when we talk about expanding the community, what I hear you guys saying is our hope in prayer, and frankly, God's hope in prayer, is that every human would have that kind of expansive community so that they would have people who celebrate with them the great joys of life. Because there's nothing like having a great joy and then being like, okay, who's here to celebrate with me, right? Or encountering great struggle, right? And not having somebody to come alongside you.
That's what we experienced after my parents' house caught on fire.
Okay.
I pull up before the fire department's finished. My sister was there. My dad's in the hospital. My mom's down at the hospital. They don't even know the house is burned. And all of a sudden, people just started finding out about it and showing up. And, over the course of the next several days, as we went through what was salvageable and what wasn't, there were people there I didn't know. But people who knew my parents or knew somebody who knew my parents showed up. And it's that kind of coming alongside that just makes an incredible difference. I mean, that's God at work.
It is. We lost my mom about a month ago, and to see the community of people whose lives she had impacted over time and who we had seen some, but COVID had kind of created a block in. We were doing some math, and a couple of people who we would claim as deep, lifelong friends, like, we hadn't seen you in 5 years, right? I mean, and it's just one of those things. Life gets in the way, and then COVID happens, and then people move, and yet, when we were together in that moment of deep need, right? Yeah. It was doable with God's help and because of God's people, right? And because of people were willing to come alongside us. And part of the fulfillment of this coming alongside, right, is what we talked about last week, but it's also an intentional expansion, not just of our community, but how do we help expand the community networks of the people who are around us?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
When I think about expanding community, this may not be like the default stereotypical example, right? But we talked about school partnerships last week, right? Mentoring a young person through a school partnership is in its own way expanding their community, right? It is saying, here is an adult who is committed to you,
Yes.
who is not your parent or your big person at home, who is not your teacher, who is paid to be there, right? Because as much as we kind of sometimes have cynical sides, right? Sometimes our kids have cynical sides, right? Especially when they've encountered hurt, harm, or trouble, right? It's not somebody whose job it is to be there for them. This is just some random person who has said, you matter enough to me and to God. I mean, we don't get to say to God in the church or in the school, but you matter enough that I'm here. I'm here either every week or every month, depending on the structure of the program.
Right.
And I'm invested in you. I'm invested in you for this year. And frankly, one of the things that I have loved about mentoring relationships historically is that there are plenty of times where I've gotten a kid in like first grade and I get to walk that entire elementary school journey with them, right? Being that mentor with them along the way. And now they're in junior high and thriving and doing all kinds of stuff. And I get messages from mom periodically, just, celebrating these kind of things. And outside of that intentional act of I'm going to try to expand not only my community, but also be intentional in helping expand other communities, my life would have never intersected with this young person, right? Most likely. And certainly not with their extended family, right? But we now have extra people in our lives, extra people in that network coming out of a time where we've all experienced disruption. And so while we don't, engage and talk all that often, he knows if he needs me, I'm there. Does that make sense?
Right.
And that is part of that expanding of community, even if it's not the stereotypical example, right?
Right. And sometimes you've got to step back and just kind of look at how doors have opened, how things have happened. So one of the things that happened, I arrived in Hurst in 2021, the summer of 2021, and early that next year, we had a terrible shooting in our neighborhood. And it kind of shut down. We were on lockdown, and then the family members as well as the SWAT teams, the police officers, all of them needed a place to be. It was cold outside, and so we opened up. This was early 2022. We were wearing masks. We weren't doing a whole lot of stuff, but we opened up, and through that experience, I met the chaplain for the Hurst Police Department.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, she and I have since, we get together every so often for coffee. Part of it is me wanting to know more about the community. She and I have gotten to know each other and be good friends. She's now part of my community. Through her, I got connected to do a ride-along with an officer with the police department. And as she and I were out together, one of the things I remember this so clearly were, of course, we made a few stops, and that was all, very interesting to be a part of. But as I was asking her questions about the community, what do you know about this community? She's been an officer for 30-some-odd years. She kept saying over and over and over again, these are good people. These are really good people. And, that just, she sees something, right? And in her role, you would imagine that what she sees is not the best of humanity, and yet it's good. And so, I look back at that and I think these are the ways my community continues to be expanded.
Yeah.
It's, sometimes it is just one person at a time, but eventually it becomes, a tribe, a crew,
A community that's
community.
expanding.
Exactly.
And I know the way we've laid this out over the series of this podcast, the way we've laid it out in the book, it's kind of like a straight line effect, right? We this, then this, then this, then this, right? But it's really a cycle, right? Because what I love what you have just said is through expanding your community, you also are seeing with new eyes and new way, right? It's coming back to that place of part of neighboring is seeing your neighborhood in a new way, seeing your community in a new way. Right. I know when I was a volunteer chaplain with the Johnson County Sheriff's Department, right? They functionally had us because they didn't like making death notifications. And so they invited us to do that because there was space for us. Is a space of nobody enjoys that moment, right? But it's a place where we've walked alongside families in that. And I got to see portions of my community that I would have never seen, right? Because my church was afflicted with the same UMC that most of our UMCs are afflicted. We were upper middle class, right? And so there were pockets of our community that we just did not see, except for when we intentionally said yes to opportunities to expand our community, to expand the place where we were active and present. And so, yeah, that meant 3 a.m. phone calls sometimes, right? Where you've got to hop in the car, like, you talk about looking bad and being foggy. I looked bad and was foggy. And yet there was a moment of going to meet somebody and you're meeting them in their worst day.
Right.
And yet even on their worst day, as you said, right, we get a witness into people are good even on their worst day, right? And that comes in the expansion of the community and helps us see more fully and in a different way. As you encounter this, Matt, where have you seen kind of the expansion of community meet your reality in recent days?
We talk about this both individually and corporately, right? Neighboring happens. The one of the frustrations of doing helping, caring, serving work in a community is so many of the organizations and people don't know what the organizations around them are doing. Who's doing what? Everybody. So often, people we want to create a ministry. We want to and put our name on it. And this thing not realizing that the people 2 doors down have been doing this successfully for years. Right.
And we'd be duplicating it and doing it poorly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
this just happened across the street from us, right? So we've been doing a mobile food pantry for how long? And now there's a new one that's open.
Right. Neighboring has these sort of community and corporate elements that reaching out and forging relationships with the other churches and nonprofits and folks who are in the community doing great work. So that, one of my goals when I first started, when I shifted from youth ministry into missions ministry was how do we avoid duplicating something that's already happening? And how do we help, just if something's happening that's good in the community, let's just pour our effort into what they're doing and help make it better. And I think that in some ways we've been able to resist creating some new things that way that would have just kind of eventually faltered. And also we've made some great friendships that way. And also there are people that we don't know yet that we really need to know. That was one of the hopes of Advent Bingo was how do we begin to foster better relationships, not only with the nonprofits, but there are great leaders within our community who are small business owners, who can have a huge impact on the overall health and wellness of the community as people who are creating jobs, as people who are lifting the economic boon of the community, and especially in Southhurst, where we're located, where people could use a little extra hand, and that strengthened community could really help benefit everybody. And so that was one of the goals of Advent Bingo, and that was some lay people in our church who kind of caught this vision and just went after it. And it was awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about Advent Bingo? Because all three of us around this table know Advent Bingo. Our communities are doing Advent Bingo, right?
Yeah.
Y'all are doing it at Hurst. We're doing it in Bedford. But unpack so that our folks aren't left going, Advent Bingo, Advent Bingo. Pulling up the phone, Googling. Is this a thing?
So it's really...
Did Matt trademark this too?
Probably.
Probably. What is Advent Bingo?
So it's not really Advent Bingo. It's neighborhood bingo.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's inviting our folks to go into different spaces within our neighborhood. So for us, it's Southhurst, which, if you're not familiar with Hurst, it really is big enough to have a Southhurst. It's because of the freeway is what separates it. But the idea being that, well, in our particular circumstance, maybe 10% of our people live in Southhurst that identify as members of our church.
And the church is located in Southhurst, just for clarity for those who
we are
don't know the geography.
located in Southhurst, and maybe 10% of our people also live in that same zip code. And so the idea being that we don't necessarily know the places that the people who live there frequent.
Yeah.
And so you'll have on the bingo card, maybe it says auto repair. So maybe you go get an oil change somewhere in Southhurst.
Yeah.
Or it'll say Greek food or Mediterranean food. Well, we actually do have Mediterranean restaurants in Southhurst. So it's an opportunity for our folks to get out and experience some of the businesses that are down there. But it also helps us because we're leaving a card behind that doesn't say, here's what we need from you.
Right.
It says, we're thinking about you.
Yeah.
And we're praying for you.
It's a card of blessing.
It's a card of blessing.
Yeah.
And so we're leaving that. And so the idea is to begin to create some fertile ground where we can get to know one another, not because of something that we need, other than our need to be in relationship with our neighbors, period. It's not about getting them to come to church.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about first getting to know one another because we already know God's there.
All right.
And we're looking to see what is it that God has for all of us when we come together.
What I have been most excited about is that I can, I know it's not about what we do, but I get church points for going to my favorite Thai restaurant because it's in my neighborhood and we've got Asian food on the bingo card, right? And so, but realistically, it's about how are we present in spaces that we might not be present, right?
Right.
Because if the whole goal is to have compassion, to come alongside and expand the community, we can't do that if we just stick in our rut, if we stick in our same patterns, if we, because how many of us drive the same route to church or to work every day of the world?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Pretty much, right? If we're feeling, I've got like 3 different routes I can take if I'm feeling, festive. But it's the same 3 routes, right? And it's the same 3 spaces I drive by, and it becomes enough of the default pattern. And we talked about this in Saul, right? But that you can put blinders on, right?
Well, you stop seeing.
Yeah. You stop seeing.
sure.
You get home and you're like, how'd I get here?
Right. And so bingo invites people to that. And so I love that your lay people were the masterminds behind that. I also love, like, pastors, if you're listening to this and you want to know who are going to be my partners in this ministry of neighboring, who's got that kind of default spirit to be a community connector, right? Who's got this heart for expanding the community. The person who brings you the blackout bingo card has just identified themselves as a community person, right?
For sure.
And so, they may not say, we need volunteers for neighboring. They may not raise their hand for that, but they've just said, this is a part of who I am, right? Not an activity I want to do, but a part of who I am.
Or they're super competitive.
Or super competitive, sure.
You get a couple of those. The reward at the end, I don't think is so great that somebody who's like, I think they're the people who really finish bingo or who get the blackout. Those people really do have some capacities for connection and neighboring, and
because y'all are bribing people in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely,
Here, okay.
absolutely, and 100%. I learned this young in ministry that bribery is okay, and parenting as well. But it's
bribery with stickers and dinner.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, for sure. And we're planning. We actually the team that was doing the neighborhood bingo, we had planned for dinner for 10 or for the winners at a local restaurant, at a local Mexican restaurant right down the street from the church, for everybody who does the blackout. And then we were like, well, wait a minute, why don't we just have a church celebration at this restaurant? Have a musician come in and play some music, take over their karaoke bar for a night, and then we'll just pay for the winners. And so really everybody who's part of this is going to hopefully be there. And we're just going to have a good church dinner time together. And also those people who won that we're paying for, we absolutely are hoping to pull them into some neighboring efforts that are aimed at fostering relationships with other folks in our community. Really what this is it's a process of asset mapping. And identifying what are the bright spots in the neighborhood. Because anytime you can see something that's going well, you can rest assured that God is a part of it. And if we can see that God's a part of something in our neighborhood that's not directly tied to us, well, one, we can celebrate that, but 2, there's an invitation now for us to go and join. Yeah. And how is it we can pour into what's already happening well, so that God can do more in that space, maybe in us, through us, maybe even despite us, right? But that's sort of the goal of asset mapping is a really that's a nonprofit term, right? But it really is expanding the community and finding out that we've got friends out there that we don't know we have yet.
And in more Jesus-y language, maybe it's an invitation, instead of being focused on building our castles, to build the kingdom instead.
Oh man,
right? Because we get good at our castles, man. And this is self-confession, right? We get good at castle building.
Put my name on it. Yeah.
Put my name on it. Point people to my building. Whatever. But when it's a kingdom thing, right? When it's a God's at work in our community thing, right? When it expands that, We say as Methodists, we are here to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That transformation of the world thing doesn't happen in my castle, right? It happens in our neighborhoods. It happens in our, it happens in all the spaces where God is doing really good and amazing stuff outside, sometimes inside our walls, but often inclusive of all the space that's outside of our walls too. Mm-hmm. And so I love.
We come inside our walls to talk about it and celebrate it, but we go outside our walls to find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to be on the lookout
Yeah.
for what God is doing.
As we consider this, maybe the invitation is to enjoy neighborhood bingo, right? So if you trademarked Advent bingo, Yvonne told you were wrong. So neighborhood bingo may be the thing.
Yeah.
But as you consider this, Yvonne, this has kind of been the week where you've taken the lead in inviting us into this expansion of community. What would be maybe one other thing you would invite folks into, or maybe just an expansion of this bingo idea if we wanted for people to get practical with this? And where does this meet their day by day?
Well, we've got a great opportunity coming up. It's almost Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? And that brings all kinds of challenges. It's exciting. It's fun. It's also family. And maybe some challenging relationships, right? And so I think one of the things that we can do is kind of look at who's not there, who's, if we're hosting at our space or doing a progressive or going over to somebody else in our family's or a friend's house, who's not there? Who ought to be there? Who have we missed? Right. And what does it look like to bring them alongside? Or if there's somebody that is going to be there and there's a rub, right? It's a little tricky relationship. What are you doing ahead of time to get ready for that? Right?
Yeah.
How are you going to do, whatever you can to offer some healing there? Because all of these relationships matter. All of these relationships have some element of what God's at work doing in them. We need all of the relationships. So how do we look at getting ready for this, joy, celebration, all the people, even those people, how do we get ready for that in a way that helps us to see our need for expanding community within our families, within our circles of friends, within our churches, within our communities?
I love that relational invitation for Christmas, right? Don't just get your food order right. Don't just get the turkey and the grocery list correct. Be prepared for the relationships that are there.
Right.
Notice what's missing, who's missing, and how you can help everybody expand into that space of community and thriving. Yvonne, thank you so much for your wisdom and for your care and for being with us in this. Matt, thank you so much for being with us on this journey as we have moved into the neighborhood. Hashtag be like Jesus, right? And thank you. Sometimes I say things, who knows why. Thank you for being here with us in this journey into the neighborhood. And we hope and pray that going alongside us as we seek to live into the neighborhood has been a thing that has been thought-provoking and also invited you to enter this season in a slightly different way. And I hope and pray that, like Matt has talked about so many times, you have seen Christ alive and at work this Advent and Christmas season. Maybe in your church, but more often than that, in your community as well. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins. This is Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more. You can edit some of that craziness out.
We're just going to trademark everything, aren't we? You go right ahead.